right, everybody, welcome to another episode of Gamervision. I am one of your hosts, Jeff, and through the power of technology, we have Tony from Procedurally Generated. Say hi, Tony.
How's it going?
Going pretty good. That's I think for the most part, we are ready for this episode. I
Let's.
know you're definitely excited for it.
I have been waiting for this episode since we started talking about doing this show. This has been the one that I have been looking forward to for a very long time at this point.
That's I remember in fact joining your guys' podcast with the procedurally generated show back in January doing predictions for this year. I know you had a lot to say about streaming
Mhm.
services, and it just kind of continued on. I think we're ready to deep dive into the wonderful future that
Yeah.
is streaming services as far as gaming content goes. Um, Obviously, we're going to be talking about Google Stadia, Amazon Luna, Xbox Game Pass, or XCloud, whatever you want to call it, PlayStation Now, and GeForce Now. They have set the stage to the future of gaming, and it's all in the clouds.
Mhm.
It's all in the clouds, and that's definitely exciting for somebody who might not have the latest and greatest hardware.
Absolutely.
Uh, they can just dive right into it in a brand new game and not have to worry about all these expensive graphics cards or PlayStation 5s or Xbox Series S and X. Um, I, for one, have not spent a whole lot of time with streaming services, but I know that you have. You've played a vast amount of time
Yeah. Yeah,
on
I have.
various different services.
I think I'm pretty much the polar opposite of you. I have either right now currently active subscriptions or have had subscriptions in the past to all of the major players that are out there right now.
Which is good because that gives us a lot of content to go into with this episode. Because we're going to talk about, well, I think all of them, probably all of them.
Most of them.
Um,
There's a couple, like we won't really touch on Shadow a lot. Um, there's been a bunch of
well,
changes with Shadow that's happened recently, and I know that could be a whole episode all on its own.
all right. Well, I will leave the floor to you as far as the platform that you want to start with first. I kind of know a little bit of where you lean as far as like your preferred streaming platform, but what's the first one that you want to talk about today?
I think obviously we have to start with the biggest name, the biggest sort of punching bag in the internet, and that's Google Stadia. Um,
Well,
whether the criticism is fair or not, they have been the ones that have been out there the most. They are the ones that tried to get their name out there the biggest, and people have that knee jerk reaction when you hear the word Google. Um, and from the very beginning, they've had a very large uphill battle to climb.
that's for the most part. Like I definitely I've been one of those people that have been dishing out some punches against Google, because typically they don't support things for very long
Yeah,
unless it's YouTube or Google
yeah,
or
and
Android or
I
Android.
I can't really lie. In the beginning, I was too. I was one of those just immediately, putting on the gloves and trying to knock Google down for getting into a streaming service because I thought it was silly. Um, but my opinion, once I got past that initial gut reaction and I gave it a try, after the Founders Pass stuff, because like for the first 8 or 9 months, maybe the first almost year, you couldn't try out Google Stadia unless you had bought the Founders Pack, which I think was $140. Uh,
I think so. Didn't it come with the like a dedicated like the actual Google
yeah,
Stadia
it came
controller?
a Chromecast Ultra as well as a Stadia controller and some amount of time subscription to Stadia Pro. I don't remember exactly what it was, um, but once they went free for everybody and you could just try it out, that's when I hopped in and that's when I became a believer in Google Stadia, because the service worked. Like you got in, you were playing a game, and at the click of a button, you were in and you were playing, and it felt like you were playing. At least with my internet connection, I had where I lived when I first tried out Stadia. I had an incredible internet connection. It's gigabit fiber, the fastest you could get in a house, and the connection was solid. It worked really well. I never had any lag issues, and I've moved to a smaller town, but I have still the same internet service, and so it works incredibly well for me. And I think that is the biggest issue with any of these streaming services right now is you have to have a good internet connection. And there's a lot of places in the country that still don't have that, which is the biggest hurdle that it really has to climb. That and data caps, which is another thing, because they will all eat up your
Yeah,
data cap so fast.
yeah, that's I think I was wanting to try out Google Stadia a couple months ago because of Baldur's Gate 3,
Mhm.
and it gave me like an estimation of how much data it was going to use, and it was like I can't remember what the measure was, but I remember seeing something like it was like 16 point something gigabytes, and I can't remember if that was like a day or a week or month or
No,
whatever,
I
but
think
like
at its highest, it's if you're streaming at 1080p, not 4K, because there are some ways you can stream 4K through Google Stadia. But if you're streaming at 1080p, which is what most people are going to do, it's going to use up about 10 gigs per hour of playtime.
okay, so that may have been what I was seeing. And I was like, wow, this is because most of the internet providers now, unless you get like the gamer packages, have a data cap on them of like I think around a terabyte
It's
of
around a
data.
terabyte, yeah.
Um, but so that's definitely one of the hurdles. But um, and just kind of seeing some of the notes that we have, like the Google Stadia Store you've got on here is it's a more
Mm-hmm.
traditional game store as far as like you can still purchase the games. It's not just directly just streaming the games. You can
Yeah,
actually own
yeah.
digital titles of it.
Yeah,
Um,
with
but
Google Stadia, you log in, you create an account. It's free to create an account. You don't have to, you know, get a subscription. You don't have to do anything. You just, as long as you have a Gmail account, you can sign up for Google Stadia. And at that point, you have access to, I think it's 3 games that are free. It's the base package of Destiny 2, Super Bomberman R, I think, and then some Hitman missions.
right,
And then from there, you have the option to subscribe to Stadia Pro, which is $10 a month, and it gives you access, much like Game Pass, if you're familiar with that on the Xbox. It gives you a library of games that you just, as long as you have a Stadia Pro subscription, they're added to your library. You can play them at any time. And then it also has a section of the store where you can go and you can just buy games and add them to your library.
so I would say like Google Stadia is definitely it's had its hurdles. It
Mm-hmm.
had its issues from the first party development teams being shuttered. But
Absolutely, yeah.
as a service, like it seems to be still going strong. It seems like they're still getting the new releases. They're still doing their thing. Um, from my perspective, it kind of seems like Google Stadia, the direct competitor to Stadia would be like Amazon Luna.
Mm-hmm.
Would you like? Is that
I think
fair to
that's
make
fair.
that
Um,
as far as like a direct competitor to what they're doing?
Yeah, Amazon Luna and XCloud would be the two biggest competitors. Luna does things a little differently than Stadia does. With Stadia, with Luna, you have to subscribe to the service, and right now for early access subscribers, which anybody can be an early access subscriber at this point, all you have to do is sign up through a Fire TV, and if you do that, you can get into the early access program, and it's $5 a month for a library of it's over 80 games, I think, at this point. They're closing in on that 100 games mark for the base subscription.
All right, and I do like the prospect of kind of like pseudo game channels like the Ubisoft
Mm-hmm.
thing, like just being able to like one day Square Enix has a store and you just subscribe to Square Enix and have access to all their stuff like Final
Yeah.
Fantasy, Dragon Quest, Outriders or whatever. So I like that concept of being able to know, directly show support
Mm-hmm.
and hopefully it expands even more because I know I think like right now it's just Ubisoft, but I know
Yeah.
they've talked about more more publishers kind of doing the same thing. Um, as far as like the game library and stuff, like how does Luna stack up to like Stadia and Game Pass?
Stadia has a few more. Uh, recent titles, things like Cyberpunk. Um, I don't have the store pulled up right in front of me, but they get some of the newer titles, whereas Luna is, because it's a subscription service, you're going to get older titles, you're going to get indie titles, with the exception of Ubisoft, where if you are a Ubisoft Plus subscriber and you have Luna Plus, um, you'll be getting the Ubisoft titles day and date alongside the PC releases of those. So that's the one place where you get brand new titles if you're a subscriber to Luna, is if you're also subscribed to Ubisoft Plus.
Gotcha. So real quick, between the two controllers, the Stadia controller and the Luna controller, which one do you prefer? Because I
I
know they kind of, at least from my memory, it looks like they're fairly similar. They kind of take like an Xbox style
mm,
approach.
yeah, the Stadia controller. Well, I don't have it, so I don't have any hands-on experience with it. It's the
Oh,
one controller that I would like to have that I don't.
this
Um,
is why I need to do research.
it is it's actually closer to a PlayStation controller with the two sticks in the middle rather than offset like an Xbox controller. It connects wirelessly to your Wi-Fi so that you do not have to go through a computer and then to their data centers and back. So it reduces the input lag just a little bit. And the Luna controller is the same way. It also connects through Wi-Fi to help reduce that input lag. And I've noticed playing with the Luna controller, which I do have, it's right here. I was playing a little bit of Luna before the show actually. Um, I have noticed that there is a not a significant amount of change in the input delays, but there is some noticeable delay reduction if you have one of the controllers that's dedicated to those services. Um,
Gotcha. So I know like Google Stadia can work on a multitude of devices. I
mhm.
think Luna is kind of restricted, if I remember
um,
correctly. I think it not necessarily like super restricted, but like I think there's like a couple devices that it can't play
well,
on.
Google Stadia works on just about everything that you have. If you have a Chromecast, a phone, I think it works on tablet, both iOS and Android tablets. Um, you can go through your PC as well. Uh, I have a an Amazon Fire tablet. I have an HD8, which I think is about $100. And in 5 minutes, you can sideload the Google Play Store and download Stadia on a Fire tablet, and it works incredibly well on even that device. So if you're looking for something to give you a mobile gaming experience for not a lot of money, that might be a way to go. Ironically, Luna doesn't work on Fire tablets yet, um, which
Weird.
seems weird. I really hope they fix that soon, um, because Luna works on everything. It works iOS, iPad, PC, your TV through an Amazon Fire TV, and that is any Fire TV device. So if you get the $20 or $30 Fire Stick that plugs into your TV, that's all you need with an Xbox
Oh,
controller,
yeah,
which you probably have lying around your house to get
yeah.
into game streaming for not a lot of money. Um, it does
And then
also
you
work
got
on Android, but only select models. Like my phone, I have a Moto something G. I don't remember what it is exactly, but it doesn't work on that device. So I'm waiting for it to be able to work on my phone. It's the one device I have that I can't play Luna on.
Gotcha. And then a really smooth segue since we're talking about Xbox controllers. Obviously there's Xbox Game Pass, one
Mm-hmm.
that I think right now is as far as healthy platforms seems to be kind of a front runner as
Yeah,
far as like
I think
the streaming, like game streaming services.
I think that's fair.
Um, and I think a big push that differentiates it from Stadia and Luna is every first party Microsoft
Yeah,
title
day
day
one.
in day,
Yeah,
is available on Game Pass, and that's a huge thing. With Halo and Gears and Forza, and hopefully, hopefully we hear something soon about a new Fable game. Um, it seems like there's some rumors that are starting to bubble up about that. So hopefully a Fable game. Like I think that's a huge thing that kind of tips the needle in Microsoft's favor is just having a fully functioning exclusive, first party output for that service.
Yeah.
But
XCloud is sort of that perfect hybrid model between game streaming and traditional console games, because with Game Pass Ultimate you have access to xCloud itself, which allows you to stream games to your phone, but you also have access to games that you can download to your console and have there natively, and uh, as long as it's downloaded you can play it and you don't have to have access to the internet 100% of the
yeah,
time like you do with xCloud or any of the other streaming services. Um, it's got one of the bigger libraries. It's not the biggest. That we'll actually get to that in a little bit. But I think on console, xCloud or Game Pass has over 300 games, and on PC it's a little over 200. Um, I don't know
and I
the
know
numbers
that,
exactly. I should have had those with me, but I don't. I don't have those.
and, and I and I know with Game Pass, like they cycle some games in and out. First
Hmm.
party titles are there permanently, or at least it seems like permanently. I don't think I've seen anything that's been taken off
They
of the
have
service.
had some first party stuff go off. With like the Forza series, you generally get the newest release and then the older ones tend to
Okay.
drop off.
But as far as like the third party stuff, they'll typically have what seems like a 6 month window or 9 month
Hmm.
window or sometimes a year, and then you'll kind of see some games rotate out,
Yeah.
but they're always putting new games in to kind of fill
Yeah.
taking games
Yeah,
out.
if games come off, other games are coming on, and it's just constantly just a rotating library of games that you'll have available. XCloud's probably the most confusing as to what you can play where. And I say XCloud, and when I
Yeah,
say XCloud, we really mean Game Pass or Game Pass Ultimate, because they have three different places that you can play games, and not everything can be played everywhere. So you have
yeah,
your console games, you have your PC games, and then you have games that are in the cloud. Um, and those are available to be played on whatever you have. Microsoft is really pushing for play our games whenever, wherever, and they're trying to get it on every device possible. It's on Android, it's on iOS. Recently, there was a lot of drama with getting xCloud on iOS. Um,
yeah.
but the
And,
other
and I
thing that
know,
Microsoft is really doing that's really, really nice is, or for some people, I don't particularly like it because I hate touch controls. Um, but with their cloud stuff, they're really pushing for uh, controller choice. And so you can use an Xbox controller, or a lot of them now are doing touch controls on your screen that are customized to the game itself. So rather than having just a straight virtual controller, they're really trying to get developers to think about the inputs of the game and making them work without having unnecessary controls on the screen just taking up space.
kind of addressing some like like accessibility
Yeah.
uh, features and stuff. Um, and we were trying to like aim for a fairly, we knew this episode was gonna
Yeah, it's
balloon
going to
like
be a big
we knew.
episode.
Because like there's still like two more big players that's in the game, like, well, pun intended. um like the fact that there's PlayStation Now, which was actually one of the first
Yeah.
that started this whole streaming thing back in, like, I think 2014, I believe.
Yeah, I don't remember
um
exactly when they started.
they're kind of gearing it towards the PS4 and trying to
Mm.
kind of using it as a means, as a backwards compatible solution, because the PlayStation 3 is just being so difficult
Yeah.
to work with. Um, but ironically, as we've seen with like Google Stadia and Amazon Luna and Xbox Game Pass and XCloud, PlayStation Now has fallen far
Yeah.
behind the competition.
Yeah.
You
Of
had kind of a little foreshadowing
of the
that
five
you had.
major players that we have here, I would put them
Yeah,
fifth on the list of services you should uh, subscribe to.
and you kind of foreshadowed it with the talking about Game Pass. the really the only category that PlayStation Now seems to win at is the amount of
Hmm.
games that are available on the service.
Yeah,
Outside of that, um, it's really just kind of a yeah, we have it.
yeah.
It
It
it, it does a thing.
and it's really kind of disappointing too because they have the biggest library. They have over 700 games that are available on PlayStation Now. And that
Like
includes titles from the PS2, the PS3, and the PS4. PS2 and PS4 games you can actually download to your system and run those natively. PS3 have to be streamed, but their entire
yeah,
library can be streamed directly to your PS4 or your PC. But I've had a lot of issues with the PC app and reliability with that service. It just doesn't work on PC the way it should.
and like some of the big gripes for PlayStation Now was like it was one of the last services to support 1080p.
Mm-hmm.
Like even while Game Pass and Luna and all this stuff was doing 1080p, or in some cases like with Stadia, some 4K games being streamed.
Mm-hmm.
PlayStation Now was streaming at 720 through all the way up to I think till last year. I think it was last year when they finally released like an update that allowed it to do 1080p. But
Yeah.
it's like for being a platform that one has so many games, and of course you've got the PlayStation name behind it. Um, for being one of the firsts, they it seems like they they really weren't focusing on this. It was just
No, they
something that
weren't.
they wanted to try, and then Microsoft was like, well, hey, we can do this. Like this would be a
Yeah.
great way to kind of cross our different divisions together, and we make something amazing. And Sony just continued to sleep on it.
Yeah. Yeah. And
Um,
Microsoft really took what PlayStation was doing and said, let's make this the best possible service we can. And
yeah,
while it's not the best in terms of the tech, I think Stadia actually is far and away the best in terms of the streaming tech, the reliability of the service. Um,
yeah,
it's got its own issues with some behind the scenes drama and things like that, but Google is swearing that they're going to stick with it. And for the
yeah.
foreseeable future, you'll be able to buy games and you'll continue to be able to add games to your library and play, which is a really good thing. Um, I'd really like to see PlayStation focus a little bit more on PlayStation Now and getting that to the level that these other players are doing.
Because they're consistently like every month they're adding new games. So like there's somebody within there that's
Mm-hmm.
like, hey, we got to keep building up this library. Um, but it just doesn't really seem to be much of a focus until who knows. There was an investor talk, but who knows what's actually going to happen from that.
Yeah,
Um, and as far as like the other Now service, there's the GeForce Now,
yeah,
which I don't. I've the other services I've heard a lot about, and I've dabbled in a little bit of at least three of those four. Um, I've I haven't touched
yeah.
GeForce Now, which I believe is Nvidia.
Yes, it is. It is a streaming service from Nvidia, focusing specifically on PC games. Um, and the thing that they do that's different than everybody else, which has caused some issues for them as well, is rather than giving you a selection of games that you can play or allowing you to buy specific games from like a GeForce Now storefront, what you do is you buy the games on other services like the Epic Game Store, Steam, Good Old Games, and you bring those over to GeForce Now. And if you connect your libraries together, all of those games show up in your GeForce Now library. And as long as you own them on one of those other services, and that's the big thing is you have to own those games somewhere else, you can play them on GeForce Now.
Gotcha. Any specific like controllers or anything, or does it works with
It
any
works with
devices out there?
anything that you can connect to your PC or to your
Okay,
phone
so
because they also have a mobile app.
so it's fairly accessible.
Yeah.
Um, so I think obviously there's a lot to 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 talk about as far as these services go, because it really is going to be the future. As far as we've got music streaming, we've got TV shows and
Yeah.
movies that are streaming. In fact, you actually have some services that are no longer allowed to purchase movies. Like Sony is shuttering
Hmm.
their PlayStation Video, so you can't even buy movies. So more and more companies are heading towards the streaming. Gaming's going to get there one day,
Yeah. It's
and
inevitable.
you know, there's a lot of potential in this space. We'll be diving into some ownership stuff in a future episode of like physical, digital, and streaming and that kind of stuff. But there we're at a moment where the landscape of gaming is changing. It's kind of changing
Hmm.
rapidly at this point. You've got a lot of companies that are pushing in different directions. Um, and you're having a lot of companies that are having to adapt, or hopefully they adapt to continue, building
Yeah.
a really strong uh, future, because gaming is a multi-billion-dollar
Hmm.
industry, um, and it's either you adapt or you die.
Yeah.
So it'll be interesting to see just how these companies continue to evolve and just what the future is. Um, with Amazon's first party output, they've struggled with some stuff, but they're doubling down. They're continuing to to make something
Yeah.
work, which is a great attitude to have. Um,
Yeah.
they're not shuttering things up. Uh, but I think it'll be interesting to see just what happens 10 years down the road.
Yeah.
Is
It's
Game Pass going to maintain its kind of front runner status, or will Google Stadia be able to turn things around and start doing first party stuff again? But
mm,
uh, just there's so much to talk about with this, because there's so many players involved.
yeah. And with a lot of these players, they're all trying slightly different things. There's no
Yeah,
two services that are exactly the same, and somebody's going to come along and figure out that perfect balance for what gamers want. I mean, you're not going to get your competitive gamers going to a game streaming service to play, competitive Street Fighter or competitive Forza or competitive
yeah,
Madden. It's just not going to happen. There's the lag input is there, and it's going to cause them issues where your casual everyday gamer, or the gamer that can't afford high dollar PCs or high dollar consoles, it gives them a chance to play games that they normally wouldn't be able to play. And that's one of the big positives that we're seeing from these game streaming services. We're seeing that the tech works, it's there. There's a lot of infrastructure issues that we have to overcome worldwide at this point. Um, One thing before we start to close out is that I'd really like to see from these services with like Game Pass and PlayStation Now is building those two things together so that if you go to the Xbox store and you buy a game, say you buy Halo Infinite when it comes out, and you buy it digitally through the Xbox store, you can click a button and you can immediately start playing through XCloud on your
yeah,
system while the game is downloading in the background, so you don't have to wait for the game to download. But it will be downloading and it will be there so that you can have, if you when you're ready to get into that multiplayer Halo, you have the power of the Xbox, but you also were able to play the game without having to wait for a multi-hour download. And I
yeah.
want to see that from Microsoft and Sony, and hopefully Nintendo will do something at some point.
Well, who knows? Maybe Nintendo will be the company that ends up launching a streaming service that just trumps them all. That just ends up just beating all these different services. Um, but it's just one of those things where E3's right around the corner, so who knows? Maybe we'll have some surprise announcements that come out of like the Nintendo Direct. Maybe they'll announce something
I'd
with
love it,
their
but I
online
don't
service.
see Nintendo getting into the streaming services anytime soon.
Yeah, they don't typically like following what other people do. They like to beat to their own drum.
Yeah.
But one thing with it is I know like Microsoft and Sony were actually talking about that a little at the launch of the PS4 and the Xbox One, going into that, just being able to go to the store and purchase a game and it start downloading, and while it's downloading, you're playing the game
Mm.
while it downloads. We never quite got to that, but I think with the tech that's now available, it it could be something that happens,
Yeah.
pretty soon. Um, but that's definitely this is definitely a topic that we can talk about for hours and hours, because there's just so much
Oh yeah.
unknown
Oh
with
yeah,
these
absolutely.
services.
I'd sit and
Um,
talk about any of these streaming services with anybody that wanted to, um, and I would talk to you for hours about them and show you the positives and the negatives of each of them and why they're important for the future of gaming. It's not going to be the core experience for a lot of players. It's going to be a supplemental experience, but it's also going to give people access to things they wouldn't have been able to in the past, which is
yeah.
very, very positive.
So, everybody out there that's watching, let us know in the comments, just what you think, what the future of gaming holds. Your thoughts and suggestions. Um, I think this has been a great episode. Definitely a lot to talk about, and who knows, we may dive into it a little bit more.
Yeah.
Especially after E3, just to see what happens from all that, which is just a couple weeks away. Um, but I've been Jeff. I am Jeff. I haven't. I've not been. I am
You
Jeff.
still are.
Yeah, I still am. From just one more level.
And I'm Tony from Procedurally Generated.
All right, and we will see you with the next episode of Gamervision.